Good morning, Devils fans. It is July 11th, which means development camp has officially kicked off. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into that, as the Devils did sign 3 players to contracts yesterday. First off was Ryan Fitzgerald, who received an AHL deal. He is the son of Tom Fitzgerald, and his brother Brendan was an invitee to development camp this week, as well as Yoshira Hirano and Eric Cooley, who each received 2-way deals. So now let's talk about development camp. The rosters did finally release. If you wanted to get a full rundown of the players invited, feel free to do a simple Google search. It is readily available all over the internet. From that roster, there was a few key exceptions who were not there. There was no Luke, no Simone Nemec, no Alexander Holtz, and no Nolan Foote. Now, I don't think this is an indication that these guys are locks for making the big squad or anything, but at least for the likes of Nemec and Luke, they played a lot of hockey this year, like a lot of hockey. And so they did deserve some rest while they are in their off-season routines as they're getting ready for training camp. Holtz has been to a few of these now, but what some of his other draft companions from his draft year are at camp, so it's not like he aged out of it or anything as such. But I do believe it was a indication that between the decent amount of NHL games he was up for, he didn't play in as many as he was sitting in the press box for, but he has gotten much more of that NHL experience that is likely development camp would have been unnecessary. If anything, he probably just stands out way too much compared to the rest of the guys that are here, as no one at this camp seems to have a shot at making the roster. Even guys like Graham Clark are not here. But I also think with the indication of Holtz and Foote not being here, they seem to be the guys primed up to take those NHL spots. But let's get into the actual players who were at development camp. One other big note of our first rounders, Chase Stillman. He is not skating this entire week. He's recovering from surgery on his septum. He is mostly there for a leadership role to help guide the newer guys as he is now at his 3rd development camp. I'm going to talk about him a bit more later as we get into his interview, but I did want to start off with a quote that he gave us that came from his brother Riley, who plays with the Buffalo Sabres. He said, Riley told him to work hard and keep your mouth shut at these type of events. Nobody wants a guy who's walking around who's too comfortable. There's always something to learn. So I'm sure this is something he's also sharing with the other guys, and then also taking upon himself as the veteran of this development camp, that even though he's not on the ice, he is still there to learn and there to help lead the younger guys as well. So the first day development camp is closed to the public, so there's not much on-ice stuff to discuss. We get a little bit of pictures here and a little bit trickles out from the media. But while that on-ice stuff is important, development camp to me is much more about getting these guys acclimated to the Devils organization, meeting the staff, seeing the facility, forming bonds with the teammates, and just really becoming comfortable. Because as you'll hear from a few of the guys later on, that have been here before, that first go around is really stressful for the true rookies that are coming in, and can be a bit overwhelming. And then when you're returning for your 2nd or even 3rd year, you're just a lot more comfortable and kind of learn the pace of what to expect. And with anything, when you get accustomed to something and you're comfortable, you tend to just do better. And so it's really, again, just getting these guys acclimated to anything Devils, and really teaching them what we have to offer here. The first guy on the ice was Tyler Brennan. He's one of our goalies. He's only 19 years old, 4th round pick in 2022. So far in his development, his WHL numbers are, probably describe them mid at best, but goalies are fairly voodoo. We've seen with Schmid, with Blackwood even, you can argue, Blackwood maybe mixed results. We can argue about why that is. But Schmid is clearly on the uprise, not just amongst Devils fans, but on the NHL as a whole. And he's also had a tumultuous path to the NHL. So I never count any goalie out at all. Really, it's, again, when they're this young, who knows? who knows? They're a goalie. Again, they are voodoo. Uh, One other goalie note, we had our EU amateur goalie scout Anders Nilsson on the ice working with the goalies. If you're not familiar with him, he only just retired a couple seasons ago, played 161 NHL games in his career, which again, you have to remember he's a goalie. So you're not really factoring in a full 82 game schedule, but he played, I believe it was 6 or 7 seasons, give or take, across the NHL. But the biggest thing of note, or not the biggest thing, but the one thing I didn't know about him was he was the first NHL goalie to put a pride flag on his mask. So I thought it would only be appropriate to wear our Pride Devils shirt here. It's just something great to see. It shows what your organization, where their head has at with bringing him in. I don't think it is any secret that the Devils organization is pretty progressive in what they help support, and that makes me very proud to be a Devils fan. Continuing on with the players, we're going to circle back around to Brendan Fitzgerald, the other son of Tom. He's actually a Devils fan since he was 12 years old. Patty was his favorite player, so now I have my new favorite player. I'm an absolute sucker for any Jersey boy or player who grew up as a Devils fan, and it is quite surprising to me that Brendan grew up as one, considering the hockey family he comes from and the just sheer vast options in front of him of teams to select. So I guess it does make some sense, just the era of hockey he grew up in. But yeah, I mean, he's still even too young to really remember those glory days of the Devils. So absolute shout out to Brendan. I hope he has major success in his career, if not only just for that fact. A little tidbit, he did mention that he was in Florida for the Cup hoping to watch his brother, but his brother did not play until out in Vegas, so he didn't get to actually see him on the ice. But he did get to hang out with Matty Tkachuk, who I'm a big fan of, who is also his cousin. Again, hockey world's pretty small. The Fitzgeralds and the Tkachuks are related, if you did not know that. So he said it was a great time hanging out at Matty's house and just getting that full experience. I really do feel like stuff like that only fuels the hunger to make it to the big show even more. So we'll see what is in store for him in the future. I do have some notes on a few other guys, just what trickled out from the media, guys that I think maybe have a shot down the road of making it into the NHL. But for a lot of these guys, it's going to be a tough path, at least to make it onto our roster, as we are deep and young. If you didn't see it, came out at least as of rosters as they are now, leading into the next season. We're still the third youngest team on average in the NHL. Crazy, considering how far we just came last season and on the trajectory we're on. It's pretty bonkers stuff. So, I mean, it is all flashing lights ahead for us. But again, a couple guys I want to talk about. Topias Villain, the quote out of him was he wants to be the steal of his draft. He was 129th overall, 5th rounder in 2021. And it's that, again, that kind of hunger that you want to see from these guys. I've always liked Topias since we drafted him. I think he has pretty decent pedigree and is showing to be progressing pretty well. Again, he's probably looking at a long road to making it on this team, but he has pretty good feedback from what I am seeing from scouts for his future of making the NHL. So again, if he's even just a high draft, a high asset to use in a trade, he's valued there. I mean, and you're talking about a 5th round pick, talking about maybe even making the NHL. That's stuff you love to see. Another guy, a late round pick, who I'm actually even more excited about and was getting a lot of hype from the media yesterday, was Josh Philman. His big quote was he put on 15 pounds this summer. Cap Friendly had him listed at 6'1", 178. So if you do the quick math there, you're talking over 190, maybe possibly even pushing into the 200s at 6'1". I mean, he was still young when that was measured, so I mean, possibly even bumped up to 6'2" at this point. But he was 166th overall, 6th rounder in 2022. Only 19 years old, and he's a young 19, only turning that a few months ago. He actually put up 75 points in 64 games in the WHL. So that's all really good. His trajectory is looking fantastic. I mean, if he's really bulking out, which was his biggest criticism, there's a lot to be excited for with Josh Philman. The one big quote from a media member was that he's full of energy, stands out in competition, and just has that it factor. Was very proud of being a member of the leadership group for his current team. and set a goal of making the national Canadian team. Uh, for me, hearing that leadership group and having a reasonable goal of making his national team, that's again just something you really do love to see and hear from your prospects, as he's only 19. You don't want him thinking, hey, I'm going to be making this NHL squad right away. You sometimes get those big, bold proclamations from some guys. I think across the board, you'll realize that all of our prospects have been very level headed in where they're at in their development and the expectations of making down the road than anything this year. I do want to credit that quote. It did come from Josh Renitz, a member of the Hockey Writers. Definitely give him a follow on Twitter and check it out, as he will be covering the Devils for this season. So now to get into the interviews and some quotes from the guys, we had Hamin Aho, our first draft pick of this most recent draft, a second rounder. Him, along with all the Finnish guys, arrived this past Saturday, and that group's really the only guys he knows. No one else at camp he is familiar with, which I think is a good thing. He has some familiarity with guys that he can be comfortable with, but also gets him out of his box and helps acclimate him amongst his peers within our organization. For his development, he does plan on returning to Finland to continue to play. He's played in the men's league over there in Liga, wants to return and earn more ice. He has to be a smart player over there, as he puts it, playing against bigger guys and needing to be more physical. So when you're this young playing against men, that was a fun quote with Kako and Jack. It really just helps project you into the NHL that much easier. He is a self-described ozone player with smart plays who makes smart plays for himself and his teammates. He wants to improve his goal scoring, work on the power play a bit, and has already talked about to his coaches about this bigger role, which is great to see. He's learned a lot playing over in Liga, even with his brother, which is also nice, being such a young guy in a men's league, having that support system, and is also learning some from some former NHL player vets over there. Again, just gaining that experience as a young guy. Best quote for me, he's very happy to be an NHL player in New Jersey. So cannot wait to see where his development goes. If you listen to JP from the podcast, he's not too high on him, but he was our first pick. Scouts definitely see something there, so I'm excited. Next up was Seamus Casey. This is a big prospect for us. I mean, we got him, I think, as a steal, and his projection is he's going to make the NHL one day. Is it going to be on this team on the right side? Certainly possible. Just seeing maybe possibly, though, when Marino's no longer here, I think the right side's very full up for the next few years at the least. So we'll see exactly where that ends up. He said it was at this camp, it was a much easier time this time around, being his second time here. Had some familiar faces, some new. Much less stressful now knowing the staff in the building. Learned a lot from the older guys, especially from Utica. Again, I said it earlier, it's just getting that familiarity here that really helps being comfortable and showing your game. He just learned to have fun and play hard, not to be stressed out about the situation. A few other notable quotes. He's led this time in Utica with great teammates and staff. He's going to be spending at least a couple more years there. So it's good to see that he is comfortable where he's at. For our biggest Michigan prospect, Luke, he loved watching Luke step right in and have an impact here in the NHL, not just the end of the regular season, but also playoffs. What he learned from Luke with his time playing with him was to stay even keel. Don't get too high, don't get too low, don't focus too hard on your great plays or the bad plays. You just clear mind, play your game, and that's going to make you a great player down the road. He did put on some weight and gained some strength this offseason, and that continues to be his target. He's looking to gain 10 more pounds the right way, eating well, working out the right way, and not just full-on bulking, but getting the muscle in the right spots. As far as on-ice focus, he's looking to improve his gap control, both offensively and defensively, and that's a huge thing for defensemen, especially in the NHL, so that's something you love to see. He does describe himself as a two-way defenseman, likes to bring that offense, which I think is very obvious, as he was actually thrust into a centerman role position for a game with Michigan, where he actually put up 2 goals and an assist. Big quote for me from him was, be a hockey player. You should know the role of every position, which adds to your value on the team. And that's just great, especially I'm actually currently watching Ted Lasso towards the end, not to get into spoilers, but big thing about knowing your teammates, knowing every position on the field or on the ice. Uh, that's just one thing, but it's great to see and hear. I think he has a great head on his shoulders and is a very skilled player. Really, the only knock on him is his size, but we're not needing or expecting him to be a top line guy here. So if he can fill in that bottom ish role, and the NHL is trending that way anyway, I think he has a bright, bright future ahead of him. Finally, to kind of wrap this up, we're going to swing back around to Chase Stillman. This is his third camp. Excited to be back. And like I said, he's not on the ice for this week, so he's really there just helping the guys get acclimated and learn. He's over this time at his now third camp from the first two, just learned that these practices are harder and faster than anything he had experienced in his other leagues. It really just makes you want to get back home and practice even harder, seeing the level of play is like here. The big step for him is making that jump to Utica. He will now finally have some time away from home, and it's a big life moment for him, which is always, you can see the pride in his face, which is great to see. He wants to make that push to the big squad eventually, but he's under no expectation that is imminent, especially given the depth of the current squad. He knows what is expected of him as a player with talking with Fitz. It's about that off-ice leadership, but also being that on-ice player that he is and bringing the style that he will bring. He wanted to let it be known that he isn't just a hitter and fighter, even if that's what you kind of saw from his viral play. He brings that hard-nosed style. He does chirp on the ice, gets in the guys' faces in the corner. He wants to be a hard guy to play against, but still bring skill to it. He knows the offseason he needs to get even bigger, even stronger to play the game he wants to play. He knows he's not the overly biggest guy, so he needs to be bigger to play the style he wants to play. But tactically, it's about getting to those right areas of the ice for the game he's playing. And he knows his production was lacking a bit. One quote that stood out to me, I didn't really see anywhere else when watching his interview, was, "If I can fill in the shoes of the way they want me to play here, I'll always have a job," was what he was told. So I think that's quite telling for where the organization pictures him going forward. I know he was a very contentious pick where we got him, and I kind of think of him almost like a Muka Madulin, and fans were not happy with how high he was taken. Now, when we took Muka Madulin, I was much higher on him than I am on Stillman with the spot he was taken, but I completely understand the thought process. He had missed a year with COVID. If you were trying to project him out, you could see the style of play and what he had done a couple seasons prior, that if he kept on that trajectory, there was something here to be had. And I'm still pretty excited for him going forward. We'll really see what we have in him going down the road. He's very likely topping out at absolute best a third line guy. I'd love for him to be more, but who knows? But he's very likely more of a fourth line type guy, but that's not his fault where he was taken. Love the player. If you want to criticize anything, have it be the organization. But if you're someone who says take best player available, stick to your board, if this is where they had him on their board, even if every other team possibly maybe takes him in the second, which we didn't have a second round pick, or he drops even to the third, which was where I think people would have felt more comfortable with him. If he was the next highest on your board, you take him. So I'm always rooting for these guys, all of them. Obviously, they're not all going to make the team. Like I said, some of them are going to be trade assets, and a player like Stillman brings something that a lot of teams are looking for. So that really covers the first day. Again, today, later on with development camp, it is another non-public day. Wednesdays, we're really going to get our first view and video coming from the ice. So I will update you all tomorrow morning on what we learned today and get further. And that's really it. Let's go Devils. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.